Hey, what's going on, good people? Welcome to Russ Can't Fly. Man, I am so excited. Part 3 coming up. Let's go. Okay, so before I get into part 3 of this three-part series, I am so excited to be finishing this off because I can't wait to get to the flying videos. But before I get to part 3 of this three-part series, I wanted to take the time just to give a shout out to all the first responders, all of the air traffic controllers, all of the aviators that were involved or touched in some way to 9/11. I don't want to get too much into it because I don't want to be crying on camera because, of course, the 20-year anniversary, what a ridiculously monumental time in our American lives. And you know, as I stand here on this general aviation airfield, I would be remiss if I didn't say that that event not only had a huge impact on the beloved city of New York, but it had a huge impact on the entire aviation industry. I mean, think about it. Airplanes were used, better yet, airplanes were weaponized to attack us, our own domestic airplanes. So definitely a huge thing. I just can't say enough about the heroes that were on, I believe it was Flight 93, but I have to give a shout out to all of the pilots, air traffic controllers that got the rest of the traffic out of the skies and onto the ground safely. Huge monumental task. So shout out to all of you. And if any of you have been touched personally by the 9/11 tragedy, my prayers go out to you and your families. I know it's something that will never go away and never get easier. But hopefully with the prayers of all of us and with the love that we continue to show you all, that it gets a little easier. All right, so with that, I want to jump into this part 3. This is the final part of the check ride. This is the actual flight portion. And really, there's 3 key things that I want to raise about the practical part of the test or the actual flight portion that, you know, I think merits some attention. So let's get to it. Okay, so I really have been making an attempt to be more succinct in my videos. Sometimes when I watch them back myself, I'm thinking, wow, dude, you are way too verbose. Like, even for you, way too many words to get a point across. So I'm definitely going to try to be a little bit more efficient in delivering what I think is something that, you know, should be thought about. So there's 3 things that I really want all of you, if you're close to your check ride or even thinking about check rides, or if you're just an aviation enthusiast and you're wondering what somebody who's about to do a check ride and they're about to do their flight portion should be thinking about, then, you know, hopefully you find these tips helpful. Now, again, this is not a substitute for your certified flight instructor's instruction or anybody who is an actual licensed instructor. I am not. I am a licensed private pilot, but I'm not a licensed instructor. But, you know, this is just observations to try to help some of my aviation peeps out to navigate this first check ride, which is absolutely gut-wrenching. All right, so let's get to the first point. Okay, so the first thing that you want to be thinking about as you move from the oral to the flight portion is what I call the period of transition. Yes, there's a transition from, okay, you've been sitting in an office, the designated pilot examiner has been throwing questions at you, and you have now passed the oral portion. He or she has gone through all of the components and each of the airman certification standards. he or she has picked out all of the questions, going through all of the different categories and talking about all of the risk or risk minimization things, and you have now gone through that portion. It is now time to transition to the flight portion, and here's where you really need to be thinking about this period, because it's kind of a tricky time, because now you know, all right, whew, thank you, Lord, I've got that oral behind me. You may take a potty break or whatever. There may be some time to stretch your legs, but please do not take yourself out of test mode. You are still taking your check ride. Even though now you've gotten over this hurdle, you and the DPE may be yucking it up. You may feel comfortable. And if he or she does her job, that's what they kind of should do. They're there to kind of help you help you be comfortable. I mean, they don't want you to fail, really. So if they do their job, you're going to feel comfortable. But please do not relax to the point where you start getting sloppy. That period of transition between the oral and the flight position can be real tricky, and here's how it plays out. So you're now going to the airplane and you're beginning to do your pre-flight inspection. And so now you think the oral is over, but now you're not doing the same type of oral, but the oral still kind of leaks into this flight portion, because now that you're at the airplane, the DPE can still ask you questions when you go out there. And yes, everything is fair game. To tire pressure, brakes, distinguishing between all of the antennas on the airplane, which ones are your comms, which ones are your ELT, all of your control surfaces. So because of the fact that you're going to continue, or you may continue to get questions as you transition to the airplane, I want you to really think about keeping your composure and staying focused. If you've done a good enough job to pass the oral, then whatever you have channeled to get yourself through that, stay in that lane. Don't come out of it. Don't relax too much. You know, definitely enjoy and quickly celebrate the fact that you have passed your oral and you're now going into this transition. But don't relax, because this is a time where you could get sloppy. You get a offhand question like, yeah, can you take off with frost on the wings? And you're not really keyed in the way you were during the oral, and you say something crazy like, yeah, sure, you can take off with frost on the wings. Answering the question that way isn't an automatic failure, of course, but that DP is probably going to be real concerned about, okay, now wait, this person seemed to be doing fine in the oral. That was a very strange and incorrect answer to my question. Stay in your game, keep your game face, stay focused, keep it frosty. Don't relax so much where you're no longer in test mode, because remember, as soon as you get out to that airplane, there could be a whole lot of questions that is asked as you do your pre-flight. So definitely don't relax too much during the transition. That transition is important. The second part that you really want to think about, again, I know you're gonna be saying, dude, this book again? Like every part you've dealt with this book, what's up? Well, that should give you a clue of just how important this book is. And again, yes, for this second point that I want to raise, I am going to be referencing once again the Airman Certification Standards. Now, for me, it was the private pilot airplane. For you, it could be something else, but most of you, I would assume that it's going to be the ACS standards for the private pilot airplane. And this book is key. And I just want to point out a few things, because this did happen to me, and if it happens to you, don't be concerned, because this book will already have given you the ground rules, and you'll probably hear it at the beginning of your check ride anyway, but I just wanted to point this out. Okay, as you can see, the wind is kind of kicking up, but I've tabbed off a few things, and these aren't my test tabs, as I talked about in the last video when I was talking about my oral, and that video will be up at the top of the screen just in case if you missed part 2. But won't be talking about these red tabs. I put some new ones just so I can find the subject matter areas that I wanted to find pretty quickly. So as you can see here in Appendix 6, Safety of Flight, you know, my stars are like really crazy looking. My penmanship is horrible, but anyway, I digress. Use of checklists. I can't emphasize enough how important this is. And now I know many of you may be more skilled than me. Your brains are able to retain things, but I'm going to tell you, you should always use your checklist. I know there's people out there who have memorized things. You do it from memory and all that kind of stuff. I got to tell you, the check ride is so stress inducing that anything that you could normally rely on in terms of like your, controlling your bodily functions gets to be very difficult. And so your ability to recall short-term memory items or even long-term memory items can be, not will be, but can be impaired. And so the last thing you want to do is be up there or be at the whole short line and know that you are about to do a short field takeoff. Your POH calls for 10 degrees of flaps, and as you're going through your flow, mixture full rich, fuel tanks on both, trim set for takeoff, and you forget to put in 10 degrees of flaps and you hit that throttle to do your short field or soft field takeoff and your POH calls for it, no bueno. So that's why the use of checklists, I mean, you should go to it over and over again. Yes, you'll feel crazy completely, grabbing that card or that piece of paper or whatever you have that checklist on, but you will do yourself a huge favor by just pulling it out and going through it line by line. That way you don't have to worry about missing or skipping a step, especially something as important of a configuration issue where you're doing a maneuver and it calls for a specific configuration. Do not trust yourself. Yes, you are the bomb. You are the woman. You are the man. You're about to be a licensed private pilot, which is an amazing feat. And so obviously you're an awesome person. But I gotta tell you, stress does weird things to the body, to the brain, the heart, the nervous system, all of that stuff. So just do yourself a favor. Don't rely on something that may kind of fail you, your brain, and just pull out the checklist and use them. You'll do yourself a huge favor if you do. And the last part of this, point 2 that I wanted to make is you have to know the ACS standards code for each maneuver. You just have to know it. That way, if something is happening, you can help yourself. Here's how this can play out and why it's so important to know what the standards call for. So I'm gonna use power off stalls as an example, all right? So if you look here, there's things like, and that's why this book is so important. You gotta have this book and you gotta be looking at it. Okay, so not to belabor this point, but for power off stalls, the skills that you need to be able to demonstrate is 1, clear the area. We talked about this before, but you have to do clearing turns before each maneuver. Please do so. Unless the DPE tells you that you don't have to clear the area, step number 1, clear the area. Then select your altitude. Usually when I was doing any practice or time I was doing anything that involved maneuvers, I was always at 3,000 feet, sometimes 3,500 depending. configure the airplane. Now for here, power off stall, one of the things you have to do is establish a descent. So it's almost like you're coming in for a landing. Then you have to transition smoothly from landing pitch altitude to a nose up altitude to induce the stall. Now here's where it's absolutely crucial. You have to main a specific heading. So if you're flying a heading of, let's say 300, you can't go any more than 310 to the right or 290 to the left. Now you also can't bank or exceed 20 degrees of bank, and you can't be in plus or minus 10 degrees when you're turning while inducing the stall. Now, you know, I'm kind of reading this and trying to keep the wind from blowing the page, so I might have fumbled through that. But the bottom line is, you have to use this book so that you know each of the steps. Clear the area, select an altitude, configure the plane, establish an ascent, transition smoothly, maintain a heading, and here's the specific parameters. You have to know this. Now, why am I harping so harshly on those standards? Well, let's just say, remember I used the example that if you're flying a heading of 300, let's say you begin to, for whatever reason, you're drifting, you're not paying attention for whatever reason, or the wind is blowing you, you're crabbing, I don't know. But let's say you start getting, and you're now at a heading of 308, and you're just about to hit that 310, which is plus 10 of your heading. Now, will you fail the exam if you unfortunately don't catch it, you know, and you go to 312 heading, because now you are plus, you know, you're beyond the plus 10? No, but call it. Know that you're supposed to stay within plus or minus 10 and call it, you know. Oh, I'm supposed to stay within plus 10, plus or minus 10, you know, I'm correcting. Or catch it before you even do that. You know, that's the whole point. That's why it's crucial for you to know what these parameters are, so that you can always correct for them if you're deviating to the point where you may, you know, bust the parameters. That is especially true for steep bank turns, because everybody has that issue with the nose dropping or climbing, whatever, because you're gonna be nervous. But just know, oh, I'm getting too low, oh, I'm getting too high. Just call it. The DPE will appreciate that, one, you understand what the parameters are, and two, you're correcting for it, because that's what you do in real world scenarios. You correct for things that, you know, may not be going right in terms of flying the correct heading and all that kind of stuff. Now, do yourself a favor and lock it in so that it's not an issue. But if it's an issue, then correct it. But just know what those standards are. Don't go into a situation where you don't know that the ACS standards calls for a downwind entry into your turn around a point, and you don't do it. That's just sloppy, and you risk failing. So just get into the book, know what each of the maneuvers require, what the steps are and what the parameters are, and then you can just handle your business. And so those are the first 2 points of my 3. The last point is simply this: fly the airplane. You are more than prepared to do this check ride. I know you may be feeling like crap. Your heart is beating, your palms are sweaty, you've got cotton mouth, all of this kind of stuff. And even during the check ride, you may feel like, I am not doing as well as I expected. This is not going well. Quiet that voice and just know that you keep flying that airplane until you are told to land, taxi to the FBO, and shut the engine down. And remember this: you have done your training. Your CFI would not have signed you off if he or she didn't think you were ready. And so if you are signed off, you've got an endorsement in your logbook, then you're ready to do this. And I'm sure that if you are getting ready to take your check ride, you have received all the training you need to do what you need to do to pass the exam. So please don't question yourself. You are an amazing pilot. You've made it this far. You've done a solo. You've done cross-country solos. You've passed a written exam. You've planned cross-country flights. You can do weight and balance. And you know, you can fly the airplane. You've already proved that you can do that. Because remember, you got in an airplane, you flew from one airport and another airport at least 50 nautical miles away, landed and came back and lived to tell the story. So you are an amazing pilot. So the bottom line, point number 3 is this. Get in there and fly that daggone airplane, because you are more than qualified to do that. This check ride is just a foregone conclusion to a truth that already exists. You are already an amazing pilot. So that's it. Those are my 3 points. Watch out during the transition. Stay focused. Don't lose your focus during that transition. Get in that ACS standards. Know those standards for each of the maneuvers cold. That way you can just, save yourself if something is going wonky. And do not be afraid to hit the eject button if you need to do a discontinuous. And third, just fly. Just get in there and fly the plane. Keep your altitudes, keep your speeds, and make sure you just stay on top of yourself during the flight portion. Take that DPE for the best flight and the best ride he or she has ever been on, and you'll be on the other side and we'll start flying together. Okay, so that's it. So this concludes the 3-part series of the Checkride Debrief. I really do hope that this has been helpful for everyone who is about to take their check ride or is beginning to schedule their check rides, or aviation enthusiasts who are just curious about what we go through as student pilots. That's it. Russ can fly. Y'all be good, be safe, love your families, and I'll see you in the skies. Peace.